Today we're touring the Epcot theme park at Disney World. This is day 6 of your 10 days to a better Disney World vacation. Welcome to episode 14 of the Go Inform podcast. Today we are going on a tour of the Epcot theme park at Disney World. Hooray! Are you guys excited? I think Epcot is one of the most unique theme parks that you're going to find anywhere, and it's a really fun place to explore. There's tons of stuff to see at Epcot and lots to talk about. So thanks for joining me today. My name is Maven. I'm your hostess here on the podcast. This is day 6 in our series, 10 Days to a Better Disney World Vacation. And so we're right in the middle of the 10 episodes. And you guys are welcome to come along on the tour today, even if you haven't heard any of the other episodes. But if you want to get all my tips for helping you have a better vacation at Disney World, I suggest you pop all the way back to episode 9, which is the start of these 10 episodes. And you can find out everything from the language we all use when we talk about Disney World, to what is in the different parks, to how to plan for your first day in the theme parks. So that series is all here on the Go Inform podcast. And I really encourage you to hit the subscribe button on your podcast app so you can make sure that you don't miss any of the future episodes too. So the Epcot theme park was the second theme park to open at Disney World. It opened in 1982, so a little more than 10 years after Magic Kingdom had opened. The name Epcot actually comes from a concept that Walt Disney himself had for this part of the Disney World property. He had envisioned a total space age city, basically. It was a very 1960s view of the future, and he called this the Experimental Prototype City of Tomorrow, EPCOT. So that's why it's called Epcot. Now, after Walt's death and after reality set in terms of could you really build this city that Walt had proposed, and would people live and work there, the Disney company decided they probably would not build the experimental prototype city of tomorrow, and they kind of shelved it for a while. But then when they decided to build a second theme park, they brought some of the ideas back from that, and they brought the name, and they created the theme park Epcot. Incidentally, if you have never seen any of the history of what Walt Disney thought Epcot would be, it's really interesting. There's some old video of him explaining it and lots of pictures and stuff. I'll see if I can find some links to some of that, on YouTube, and I'll put it in the show notes for today's episode. And by the way, you can get those show notes at goinform.net/14. And one of the other things that I'm going to put right at the top of the show note for this episode will be a link to the Disney World website where you can download your own park map to follow along with me as we're moving through the parks. So the Epcot theme park is one of these places that means different things to different people. Epcot is a park that kind of has two different sides to it. The park itself is shaped, if you want to think sort of like a figure 8 or an hourglass shape. And one circle of that hourglass is called Future World and is themed after kind of science, technology, and that sort of stuff. And the other end of it is called World Showcase, and that is like a little miniature version of a trip around the world. So you've got several things that you can really dive into in Epcot. And honestly, this tour probably should be 2 different episodes because there's just so much to see and do. But today what I'm going to do is try to give you a little bit more of a big picture of what you're going to find in Epcot rather than giving you every single detail. But I hope that what you'll find out is what might be important to you to visit when you go to Epcot and how much time you think you might want to allow for visiting this park. So as you arrive at the Epcot park, something unique about this one is there's actually two very separate entrances to the Epcot theme park. So there's kind of the main front entrance, and there's a back entrance too into the park. So the main front entrance, what most people think of as the front entrance to Epcot, is the area where the monorail comes to the front of the park. And this is where the big golf ball shaped thing is that is always the symbol of Epcot. So that golf ball thing that you're like, what the heck is this? The technical name for that shape is a geodesic sphere. And it's actually made up of a whole bunch of little triangular shapes that all go together to make this really cool sphere. And inside that sphere is an attraction called Spaceship Earth. And Spaceship Earth, we're going to talk a little bit more about that after we walk into the park, but that's really the iconic symbol of Epcot. So the end of the park where you're going to see Spaceship Earth, that is the main entrance. That's how you're going to arrive to the park if you're coming by monorail, if you're coming by car, or if you are coming by Disney bus from one of the Disney World hotels. Now, the other entrance to the park is way at the other end of this hourglass shape, and that is down in the World Showcase end of the park, and that is called the International Gateway. The International Gateway end of the park is something that you can access by boat. There's a canal that runs up to this part of the park. It comes from Hollywood Studios theme park and also some of the hotels that are in this part of Disney World. You can walk to this gate as well. There's a walking path that comes all the way up to this part of the gate and actually connects all the way down to the Hollywood Studios park, which is probably along the path, maybe a mile and a half away from the International Gateway. So this is kind of unique because depending on where you're coming from and how you're coming to Epcot, you may enter the park on a completely opposite end than where you might be expecting if you don't kind of have some familiarity with what's in this park and where everything is. So this is just one more reason why it's a good idea to get prepared. Do some research, listen to things like this, get a guidebook, get some more information so that when you're planning your day in the park, you can be really thoughtful about how even are you going to enter the park and where. So we're going to go ahead and enter through the main entrance. We'll just pretend we came in on the monorail from up by the Magic Kingdom. And as we enter here, as you come up to the gate, of course, you're going to be seeing that big round ball, which is the Spaceship Earth. You're definitely going to want to stop and get a picture here with this. I mean, it shows you're in Epcot. This is the thing that says, hey, this is Epcot. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, take your picture. We're going to go ahead and walk towards Spaceship Earth. So one thing to know about Epcot is the distances are pretty vast. So just walking from the gate up to the first attraction, which is Spaceship Earth, that's going to take you a couple minutes. It's not like right there. So, and this is actually one of the things that's a little closer together in this part of the park. So this is another time when you really want to be wearing your good walking shoes and be ready to cover some distance. Now, the Spaceship Earth ride is definitely a must-see. I think it is a ride that takes you actually inside the geodesic sphere and takes you all the way up in it, up to the top. And I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, but it's really cool being in there. And also the theme of this ride is the history of communication on Earth. So it takes you all the way back to like caveman days and then into modern times. And I think the story is told really well. And it is a nice way to sort of get into the Disney theme park mood when you first come into the park to ride on Spaceship Earth. Now, that said, Spaceship Earth, everybody else wants to ride that first also. So it can get more crowded in the morning than in the afternoon. So it might be something that you don't do first thing when you walk into the park. You might just want to think about circling back and coming back to it later in the morning or even in the afternoon, because this is one case where the crowds may actually go down as the day goes on. So here we are at Spaceship Earth. We're going to continue walking further down into the park. Moving forward into this part of the park, this is called Future World. And I kind of think of this as sort of like this park, actually, I sort of think of it as like a science fair and a World's Fair, like all in one. And this is kind of the science fair part of the park. So in this end of the park, you're going to have attractions that are about nature, about science, technology, that kind of stuff. And so the first thing I think that we will do is we're going to walk past Spaceship Earth. And as we get into kind of an open, you'll see there's kind of an open space where you can either keep going straight or you can go to the right or to the left. We're going to go ahead and go to the left, and we are going to head into what on your map is going to say Future World East. Future World East has a couple of big attractions that are quite thrilling. So it depends on if you're into thrill rides or not. Probably the most thrilling is the Test Track ride. So Test Track is a ride where you get to design a car and then you ride in a vehicle that simulates how that car would perform under different conditions. So it's kind of like being a crash test dummy without the crash part. So you go over bumps, you do braking tests, you swerve, you go really fast. It's a very fun ride. And most people are probably fine with this kind of ride. But if motion's a big deal for you, you may want to skip it. But for most of us, I think Test Track's a really fun adventure to have here in Epcot. So that's one that I recommend you check out. Also back here in this part of Future World is the Mission Space Ride. And the Mission Space Ride is a ride where you can simulate being launched into space. And there are actually two different levels of this ride in terms of intensity, because originally when they opened the ride, there was only one level, and there's a lot of people who did not like the intensity of actually feeling launched into space. So they modified some of it so you can make a decision. So the orange ride is the full intensity simulation ride, and the green ride is less intense. So basically what you're doing here is you are riding in a motion simulator that NASA astronauts train in, and it simulates the G's that you're going to pull when you launch into space from Earth. I think it is one of the coolest experiences anybody can have. But I don't have a problem with motion. So if you do take the green ride, they don't put you through the astronaut training. It's much less stress. And I think for most people, it's probably fine. One thing about the Mission Space Ride, though, for whatever reason, they just went crazy with the disclosures on this. They'll actually hand you like a card that says all the reasons that you shouldn't ride this ride. So don't let that freak you out too much. If you're fine on, if you've been on a big roller coaster, or you're okay with like the teacups ride or things like that, you should be fine in the Mission Space Ride too. But of course, use your judgment and take the green or the orange path based on your own personal situation. Either way, I really think it's fun. You will feel like you're riding in a spaceship, and you will feel weightless. I believe you feel weightless either in the green or the orange, and the imagery is pretty breathtaking. So Mission Space is another one I recommend checking out. Okay, so right now for Future World East, I think that's all that we're going to check out. We're going to go ahead and walk back to the center where we came from, Spaceship Earth, and we're going to keep on walking across into Future World West. So as we head to where we can start to see Spaceship Earth again, I will draw your attention to a really, really big Disney store. It's called Mouse Gears. It's going to be as you're heading towards Future World West. You're going to see that on your left, right as you come into this big open area before you head into the Future World West area. It's called Mouse Gears, and it's a giant, giant store. You can buy just about anything Disney in here. So this is a good place for souvenir shopping. Just do that later, because right now we're on a tour. Okay, so we're going to keep on walking. We're going to walk through like a breezeway. And in this part of Future World, this is where you can meet some characters. And they're kind of unique characters. Besides just meeting Mickey, Minnie, and Goofy, you can also meet Baymax and Joy and Sadness from Inside Out. So that's a little different than some of the other parks. I think this is the only place you're going to meet Joy and Sadness or Baymax. So if meeting characters is something you really want to do, this is one to note because it's a little bit different than some of the other places. We're just going to keep on walking. And as we walk out of this breezeway, we're going to see a big building right in front of us. And it is called The Land. So there's two big buildings in this part of Future World. There's the Land and there's the Seas. So we're going to go to the Land first. Inside the Land, and they call it the Land Pavilion. You'll hear that a lot, the Land Pavilion or the Seas Pavilion. Inside the Land Pavilion, there's quite a few things going on in here. Okay, the big attraction in here is the Soarin' ride. The Soarin' ride is amazing. It feels like you are flying over some of the most amazing landmarks in the world. It's a movie where you're flying through it. It's hard to describe it, and I don't want to spoil it. If you've never ridden there's also a Soarin' ride at Disneyland, and this is basically the same ride. But if you don't have any experience with Soarin', I just say go and check it out. It is not scary. It's beautiful, and it is so relaxing. It really takes you into the moment, and so do go see Soarin'. Soarin' is very popular. This is a good one to get a Fast Pass Plus for, or see first thing in the morning. Fast Pass Plus is something I talked about back in day 4 of this series, which was episode 12. So if you want to find out more about making reservations for your rides, definitely go back and listen to that episode. So Soarin' is something to see here in the Land. Some other stuff that's here. There is a experimental garden inside here where they're growing stuff with all kinds of methods. And you can take a ride through this part of it. It's called Living with the Land. And it's a boat ride that goes around and shows you all the stuff that they're growing in this part of the pavilion. There's also a restaurant here called the Garden Grill, which revolves around the Living with the Land ride. So if you go to the Garden Grill for a meal, then you get to see a lot of that ride just by sitting at your table. So that's pretty neat. The Garden Grill is a really good place to go for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You probably will want to make a reservation to go there. Again, that goes back to episode number 12. So I talked about dining reservations there too. But this is one I highly recommend making a reservation for a good sit-down meal at any point of the day. If you don't feel like planning your dining ahead today, but you still want to eat in this building, there is a really big food court here down on the bottom level. So all kinds of different sorts of foods that you can get here. They serve food all day long, and it is there's tons of seating, so lots of room for you. the kind of place you could probably walk in almost any time of day and find something to eat and get a table without too much trouble. So the Land Pavilion here in this end of Epcot, that's a good place to go if you want something for a quick meal too. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and head back out of the Land Pavilion, and we're going to go to the seas. So as we step out of the Land Pavilion and we're looking back towards that big ball, before you head back through the breezeway back to the center area there, we're going to go out of the land and we're going to take a left. And this will head us right to the seas part of Future World, which is basically a gigantic aquarium. This is a very impressive aquarium. It's actually big enough. So we did a tour here last time and they said that you could put that entire ball, the Spaceship Earth ball, inside the tank at the Seas Pavilion. So that gives you an idea just how huge this aquarium is. So inside the Seas Pavilion, there's a few different things that you can do. One is just to go in and check out the aquarium tank. You can walk around just like any aquarium that you might visit anywhere. There's all kinds of interesting sea life here in the aquarium. You can spend tons of time just looking at fish. They have dolphins, they have sharks there, all kinds of stuff. Besides the big tank with all the big stuff, they have some smaller tanks with more unique little creatures. They also have another tank that has 2 manatees in it that have been rescued, and that is an amazing sight. Manatees are super rare and you don't see those in very many aquariums, so be sure to go and find the manatee tank and check that out. And none of this probably sounds very Disney, really in the traditional sense, but there's definitely a Disney flair here. So you're going to see a lot of references to the Nemo movies. This part of Epcot is technically called The Seas with Nemo and Friends. So they have managed to get their stamp onto it. In this part of Future World, there's actually a ride here. So there's a Finding Nemo ride that it's pretty much often that's the way you'll end up going into the building. It just kind of naturally funnels you there. It's a ride that takes you under the sea with Nemo, and he gets lost again, of course, and you have to try to find him. And they did a really clever thing by incorporating the actual aquarium into the ride. That ride, by the way, rarely has a line. Don't even bother getting a fast pass for it unless you're going like on Christmas Day. You can usually just walk right on. It's kind of a fun way to start your day or your part of your day that you're going to spend here at the Seas, because you get the kind of the Disney part of it. So the Nemo ride is here. And then the other thing that I really think is cool is called Turtle Talk with Crush. And Turtle Talk with Crush is more like a show. And I don't know how they do this, but you get to have a conversation. The audience gets to have a real live conversation with Crush, the turtle from Finding Nemo. It's an amazing piece of Imagineering, and it's never the same show because of how interactive it is. It's very funny, and I think it's one of the funniest attractions actually at Disney World. So definitely, if you have a few minutes, go and see the Turtle Talk with Crush show that you're going to find here in the Seas. So after we talk to Crush, let's go ahead and step back out. We're going to walk back to the center of Future World, kind of where we crossed over from Future World West to Future World East. So let's walk back. We're going to walk back past Baymax and Joy and Sadness and back to a central area where there's a big fountain. The fountain dances to the music sometimes, so it's fun to actually stop and watch how they've synced up the action of the fountain with the music that's playing. It's and at night it's really especially beautiful. So this area here where the fountain is a good place to stop and get a refreshment. Luckily, there's a couple of good options here if you need liquid refreshment anyway. The first one is called Fountain View Cafe, and this, you really can't miss it. When you're standing looking at the fountain and the Spaceship Earth is behind you. The Fountain View Cafe is going to be right here on your right. The Fountain View Cafe is a big Starbucks. So if you are craving your latte or whatever it is that you need from Starbucks, you can go in there and take care of that. There's also seating here, so you can have a seat and enjoy maybe you want an iced coffee. It might be hot. Another place that you can stop for a cold drink is called Club Cool, and this is pretty much right next to where the Starbucks is. This is a Coca-Cola shop, and here you can get free pop. The catch is that it is soda that's from all different parts of the world. So it's like a soda fountain, self-serve soda, and you get a cup and you can just fill it up and taste. There's usually 6 or 8 different kinds of pop that you can try here, and you can decide what you like and what you don't. It's actually pretty entertaining, and it is cool in here. So if it's a hot day, this is a good place to cool off. They do sell tons of Coca-Cola memorabilia in here. So if you collect stuff like that, this is a pretty neat shop as well. But yeah, Club Cool, you should walk in and at least get yourself a sip of some exotic pop and see what you think. Okay, so now that we've fueled up a little bit, we are going to go ahead and make the walk all the way over to the World Showcase. As we walk past the fountain away from the Spaceship Earth, we're going to be on a nice promenade that just carries us forward. And at this point, you actually, in the distance, you're going to be able to see some of the architecture in the World Showcase. The World Showcase is the World's Fair part of Epcot. So the World Showcase has a bunch of different countries represented by miniature versions of their landmarks. It's as if you are walking through a little tiny slice of each of these countries. There are shops that sell things from these specific places. There's food that's authentic from these different countries. Some of these, they call them pavilions. Again, there's kind of a World's Fair feel. So these different pavilions, also some of them have movies, entertainment of different kinds, all kinds of different things to help you sort of get in the spirit of that each place that you're going to walk through. This might already sound like a lot to do in one day, and it really is. I personally think Epcot is a multi-day kind of a park. If you really want to do something more than just quickly walk through places, if you only have one day, I encourage you to listen to the rest of this tour and then take a look at the map, take a look at a guide, and make a list of your top few things that you want to do so that you can strategize about how to do that and not get caught up with trying to do everything. So the World Showcase is organized around a lake. So there's kind of a circular route that you can take around the World Showcase. So we're going to go ahead and head towards the lake, and we're going to move around the lake in a counterclockwise direction. So when we get to the lake, we're going to take a right and start heading into this part of the park. One of my favorite things in World Showcase isn't even really in all the way into where the countries are. It's right here as we enter this part of the park, and it's called the refreshment port. It's just a little kiosk. It looks like, they just sell hot dogs or something, but what they sell is amazing. It's called a croissant donut. You may have heard this before, or you may have heard it called a cronut. Oh my gosh. It is a cross between a croissant and a donut. It is a cinnamon sugar delight. And if you've never had one, you totally need to try one. And if you have had one, then you already know you need to get one. So let's stop and get a cronut here at the refreshment port. This is something that actually I like so much that I have a post just only about this on my website. So I will I'll put a link to it in the show notes, and you can see I have a picture of what it looks like and stuff like that too. And the show notes again are at goinform.net/14. So you can hop over there, and anything else that I'm talking about today, where I think there's a link that might be helpful for you, I'll put it over there. So there are 11 different countries that you can walk through as you walk around the lake here in the World Showcase. So that is a lot. Like, really, I could do a series of 11 episodes and just do one episode for each country. That would be super cool. So subscribe, you guys. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, because maybe one day we could do that. Then that would be really fun. Today is about the big picture. So I'm going to just kind of take you through as we walk around and give you a real general idea of the sort of thing that you're going to find in these different pavilions, these different country pavilions. And then you can explore that further on your own as you're doing more research into what kind of stuff you can see here. So the first country that we're going to come to is Canada. And in Canada, the architecture you're going to see here, it looks like if you've ever seen those big Canadian hotels like up in Banff and up in BC and that sort of thing, that's what you're going to see here in the Canada Pavilion. Somehow they make a miniature version of something like that look like full size. That's the magic of Disney. But yeah, you'll feel like you've walked into British Columbia or someplace like that. Sometimes they have a lumberjack demonstration here. There is a really good restaurant here called Le Cellier. If you want a good steak dinner, that's a good place to go. And there's also a movie here called Oh Canada. That's like a 360-degree movie in the round. That you can watch and find out more about Canada. I'm not a huge fan of most of these movies in these pavilions because most of them you can't sit down, you have to stand, and there's already so much standing and walking on a day at Epcot that for me the movies aren't a huge attraction. But that is available to you, and there are movies in many of the other pavilions too. So if you want to check it out, they're really cool and they are worth the time if it's not going to take your energy away too much for other things that you're doing on your day here at Epcot. Next stop on the tour is the United Kingdom. So here you get all the good British stuff. You can get fish and chips. You can go into a tea shop. There's a store that sells all kinds of classic British rock and roll merchandise and also like English football gear and stuff like that. You can meet Alice in Wonderland here. There's a beautiful little English garden, and there's also the red London telephone booths that you can get, good photo op. So we go from Canada to the United Kingdom, and then we're going to pass the International Gateway. This is what I mentioned earlier. This is the sort of the back door to Epcot. This is also a good exit too. So sometimes it makes sense to come in from one end of Epcot and go out the other end, depending on where you're going next. So one thing I will say, if you exit out the International Gateway, there's no buses here to take you to any other parks or to your hotel. If you are staying in this part of Disney World, though, this can be really convenient because there is a boat that goes down to the boardwalk and the hotels around that area. And the boat can take you to Hollywood Studios, too. So if you're park hopping, you could start your day in Epcot and, see part of Epcot anyway. And then you could go out the International Gateway, hop on the boat, and hop over to Hollywood Studios, which, by the way, we're going to tour there tomorrow. So make sure that you stay tuned for that one. Besides the gate here at International Gateway, there's not really anything else going on here. But as we pass that, we're going into France, and we're going to cross a really beautiful little bridge where is another good picture spot, and you're going to see the Eiffel Tower, which is interesting in Florida. You're going to see a lot of things here in Florida that you wouldn't expect. And here's the Eiffel Tower. So in France, obviously, this is a good place to get food. There's quite a few different options from quick service bakery kind of stuff. There's ice cream. There's a wine shop. There's, did I mention the World Showcase? Unlike some of the other Disney parks, food and wine that's encouraged. Wine and beer and drinks are pretty plentiful here in the World Showcase. So for adults, especially if you're looking for like a adult evening out or afternoon, the World Showcase has good food and it has wine and you can get a beer and walk around with it. So there's a lot of options like this here, which is different from a lot of the other parts of the parks. So in France, again, good food, good wine, and some shopping too. And so I encourage you to spend a little bit of time in France. And next stop is going to be Morocco. So Morocco is a place that may be less familiar to a lot of visitors than France is. And the Morocco Pavilion is really beautiful. One thing about all these pavilions is that they brought artisans in from these native places to build a lot of what's in the pavilions. And so in Morocco, you will see mosaic tile work that is just exquisite all the way through the pavilion. Morocco, too, the way the pavilion is made, it's not very wide. It doesn't take up very much space on the big promenade that goes around the lake, but it's deep. So I really encourage you to sort of go down that dark kind of back alleyway and see what's in the back in Morocco. Follow the smell of the incense, check it out. You might even meet Aladdin and Jasmine back here. Sometimes they're there for a photo op. So and the food in Morocco is good too. And if you want like a Turkish coffee sort of thing, Morocco is the place to get that. So maybe that can counteract all the champagne that you drank just a minute ago when you were in France. And after you leave Morocco, now you take a few steps and you're in Japan. So the Japan Pavilion is unique because it has a real department store in it. In the Japan Pavilion, you're going to find a Mitsukoshi department store. And this is a real department store chain in Japan that if you went to Tokyo, you would find a Mitsukoshi department store. And here is a miniature version of it right in Epcot. Inside this store, it doesn't look very big from the outside, but they have everything in here. They have got kimonos, chopsticks, clothing, there's housewares, there are all kinds of cool toys, Japanese toys. You can buy incense here, and in the back of the department store, there's a big food part of it where you can get Japanese snacks and treats and stuff. You can buy sake and Japanese soda and all kinds of cool stuff. It really does feel like you've walked into Japan. Japan also has some great food options. There's a quick service restaurant here where you can get things like teriyaki and miso soup and that kind of stuff. And you can sit and eat outside in a Japanese garden. Even if all you're doing is having a glass of water, sitting out in this garden at any time, day or night at Epcot is so peaceful. It is definitely a good place to get away from a lot of the crowds and the heat and some of the things that can be overwhelming when you're traveling like this. So Japan is kind of an oasis for us. We really like to stop here every time that we visit the World Showcase. One other thing that I haven't even said yet is that All of these world pavilions are staffed by people from the country that's being represented here. Usually they're college students. They do a semester abroad kind of thing or an exchange program, and they come and live in Florida and they work in the pavilion for their country. So you will hear the language of that country being spoken all throughout any place that you go in that country's pavilion. And you can definitely take the time to talk to some of these cast members, ask them where they're from, ask them what they would choose if you don't know what these foods are. They're all Disney cast members, so they're really friendly and they love to share their culture and be part of the whole atmosphere and experience that you're having here in the World Showcase. Okay, so you might have guessed that we're not exactly going in geographical order here. We're kind of skipping all over the world. One of the fun things really is that you can go to all these different places in an afternoon here in Epcot. The next place we're going to go is called the American Experience, and this is the American Pavilion. So depending on if you feel like you've seen enough American stuff because you live in America, maybe you don't want to spend a lot of time here, or maybe, you do. There's a really great show here that talks about the founding of America and the founding fathers. And there's lots of times there are some shows with colonial music and things like that. It definitely has a colonial feel to it. The kind of food that you're going to get here in the American Pavilion is stuff like turkey legs and kind of traditional meat and potato kind of stuff. And it's kind of a big space, even though there's not a lot of buildings here. There's a lot of open space. So this is also a good place to just stop and sit down and just people watch or watch the boats going across the lake and so forth. Oh, right. There's boats. I just remembered that to tell you that too. There are boats that crisscross this lake. So you can scoot across the lake at a couple of spots instead of walking all the way around like we're doing today. So you'll see that if you look on the guide map, it shows where the boats go from, and they go frequently, like every 15 or 20 minutes, I would say. So the boats can be a good way to either save yourself some time or just save some time on your feet if you don't want to walk through the entire World Showcase route. All right. After America, we're going to go to Italy. So as you can imagine, Italy is another one of these places that's a really good stop for food and drink. You can do some wine tasting here in Italy. There is a number of different restaurant options in Italy, both quick serve and sit down kind of restaurants. Part of the Italy pavilion looks like you're in Venice. Well, without the canal, but the architecture and that kind of thing. And the architecture here is really pretty. Every single one of these pavilions is a great place to take pictures. You're going to find yourself really getting excited to capture all the amazing details that they put into these different pavilions. After Italy comes Germany, which I bet you can guess also means beer. So Germany has a Hofbrauhaus where you can go and drink your German beer and listen to the German band. And, you've got cast members in lederhosen back here. Germany also has some good shopping. There is a Christmas shop where you can get Christmas ornaments. There's a shop called the Caramel Kusha, which is a shop where you can get all kinds of different caramel treats. And there is also a shop that sells cuckoo clocks and German stuffed teddy bears and that kind of thing. Another thing that's fun in Germany is the Glockenspiel. It's a big clock on top of one of the buildings, and when it chimes, then little figures come out and dance, and it plays music, and that's pretty neat too. So yeah, Germany is really another one of these really immersive parts of the World Showcase. Continuing around the lake here, now we are approaching China. So China has its own really amazing architecture. You're going to see a temple here that is a replica of a larger temple in China. There is lots of shopping here in China. There's a shop that runs almost the whole depth of the pavilion with all kinds of different things, everything, clothing, things for your house, different kinds of knickknacks, and just all kinds of stuff, toys. So the shop is really cool. Of course, there's Chinese food here in China. Often there are Chinese acrobats performing. It is a very vibrant part of the World Showcase, and a really beautiful landscaping here too. It's definitely a place that you want to spend a little bit of time exploring and checking out. So believe it or not, we still have 2 more countries, and these 2 actually are among the most popular, and that's because both of these countries have what people would call actual rides. The next one that we're going to stop in is definitely the hottest ticket in the World Showcase, if not in Epcot, and this pavilion is Norway. That's where Anna and Elsa from Frozen are from, so of course Norway is where you're going to find the Frozen ride. The Frozen ride takes you on a journey through the world of Anna and Elsa, and it is located here in the Norway pavilion. It is tremendously popular. Definitely one you would want to have a fast pass for, or else catch it first thing in the morning. I actually have a kind of a hack that I will post a link to in the show notes to help you with a really good trick to get first online for the Frozen ride. So I will put that link in the show notes, which are again at goinform.net/14. But the quick version of it is making a breakfast reservation at the restaurant here in Norway, which is called Akershus, is going to potentially get you into the park before the park opens. And besides having a yummy breakfast and getting to meet princesses, you can also be first in line for Frozen. So if you are traveling with someone who is a huge fan of Frozen, then make sure you check out that post that I'm going to link to in the show notes. That's probably going to be, I know it will be, the topic of a future episode on the podcast too here. So make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss that. If you are coming back and listening to this and there's a whole bunch of episodes after this on the Go Inform podcast, search through there. And I'll put a link in the show notes too, but look for that one because there will be a future podcast episode about hacking your way onto that Frozen ride. But yes, so Norway has Akershus restaurant. It has the Frozen ride. It also has a meet and greet spot to meet Anna and Elsa, so you can meet those characters there. And it also has a shop where you can buy the most lovely woolen sweaters and cold weather gear and all kinds of stuff directly, that came straight from Norway. So that's kind of refreshing compared to some of the other stuff that you're going to find here in Florida. So it is a little trip to Norway here when you make this stop. And the last stop around the lake as we finish our tour of all these countries is Mexico. So Mexico, the kind of stuff you're going to find in Mexico are obviously Mexican food and tequila. So this is where you get your margarita. There's a tequila bar here. The pavilion for Mexico, actually most of it is inside, which is a little unusual compared to the other pavilions here. The Mexico pavilion is built like a big ancient pyramid. You actually go inside the pyramid and it's dark in there. It's always night in the pyramid and it's always cool. So Mexico can be very popular. A lot of people like to come in here just to kind of get out of the sun and the heat and everything that's often the way it is outside. Now, Mexico has a ride which is called the Three Caballeros, and it features Donald Duck and a couple of his friends. It's a very classic Disney dark ride. It's nothing super special, but it's one of the only rides like this in that can make it really popular. There's a restaurant here inside the pyramid, which feels like an open air evening experience, even though you might be in there at lunchtime in the middle of the afternoon, because it's dark and cool and lit like moonlight. And there's shopping. Like I said, you can try tequila here. You can buy you can buy Mexican candies and stuff like that in here. And it is pretty cool being all of a sudden being in the cool night when you've just come in from a hot Florida afternoon. But again, Mexico can get really crowded. And this is one of those things you only hear at Disney World. I actually heard someone saying once, we should go to China because Mexico is too crowded. So yeah, that's how the World Showcase works. If Mexico's too crowded, just go ahead and go over to China. Maybe it's less crowded there. So anyway, Mexico, besides having the indoor restaurant, they have also got a restaurant outside that's kind of on the waterfront. So if you want that kind of atmosphere, you can do that and have a meal here that's outside. And speaking of having a meal outside, one of the other things that I want to tell you about this part of Epcot is that this is where the big fireworks show is pretty much every night. The fireworks show at Epcot is called Illuminations, and it takes place right here on this lagoon, this lake that we've been walking around. One of the nice things about this location for the fireworks is that there's tons of spots where you can line up to watch the fireworks, because pretty much anywhere, all circling this little lake, is going to be a good place to view the fireworks. One thing that you can do is you can make a dinner reservation for one of the restaurants that's along the water to watch fireworks from there, or just plan your day so that you end up out here in World Showcase around the time that the fireworks are going to start. And then you won't have to walk all the way back here just to see that. So if we continue our loop around, now that we've left Mexico, we're just about looped all the way back to where we got those cronuts all that many, many countries ago. At this point, you can make a decision. You can go back into Future World and explore that more, or just head out of the park that way. You can catch a monorail here that will take you all the way to the Magic Kingdom. So if you want to hop to another park, you can do that. You can go out the International Gateway exit and go to Hollywood Studios too. So Epcot is really the only park that's linked up to other parks this way, which again makes it kind of unique. At this point, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys. I got to get ready for our day at Hollywood Studios tomorrow. So you can just keep on thinking about what maybe some of the highlights might be for you when you visit Epcot. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, we're going to be touring Hollywood Studios. And Hollywood Studios has a lot going on right now. So that's going to be an interesting tour. Lots to talk about. So I hope that you will join me over there tomorrow on episode 15. And also I'd like to reach out and let you guys know that I do send out a regular email when I've got new episodes or new articles on the website. So if you'd like to be in the know about what's going on with Go Informed, you can hop over to the website and just hit the subscribe button that you see right at the top of any page on the site. You can just find that at goinformed.net and join the mailing list and get into the loop. So thanks again for coming with me today on the tour. I really had fun in Epcot with you guys. I hope you did too. I will see you tomorrow, and I hope you have a remarkable vacation.